I'm going to just say it. If you don't go, you can't grow. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Talks, the podcast that brings you real strategies for sustainable fitness transformation. I don't know about you, Parris, but when I look up fitness, I'm like Googling, images or icons or emojis or something like that. The number one image that tends to pop up is somebody doing a squat, like a barbell squat. What do you think about that? Like, why is a barbell squat the thing that becomes so synonymous with weight training?
Honestly, I don't know. I think it's just kind of one of those staple exercises that people try to progress at when they first start lifting. That and bench press. Also, if we look at the big three lifts, squat, bench, deadlift, and in powerlifting, that's highlighted a lot. People like to show feats of strength using these three lifts. And a lot of times it is attached to kind of like a little bit of ego too, of like, okay, how much do you squat, or how much do you bench, or how much do you deadlift? So it's kind of one of those. But you're right, if you do search up just weightlifting, typically, even on the emoji on the iPhone,
yeah, it is. Exactly.
It's a barbell squat.
And we all love a good emoji. Today, we are going to dive a little bit into the barbell squat. And the question we're going to be tackling is, do you need to squat, specifically barbell squat, to grow your legs? So we're going to talk specifically about the application of squatting for muscle growth and building muscle. We're not going to touch too much on the powerlifting side of things because that, we know barbell squats are non-negotiable as one of the big three lifts in powerlifting. But we're going to talk about whether or not you actually really need barbell squats. And a little bit of a disclaimer, the purpose of this episode is not to by any means bash barbell squats. We will also be touching on the validity of barbell squats and why they're so valuable as well throughout the course of this discussion. There's always a gray zone, and I think that's what we're hoping to explore today and leave everybody with some considerations around, is barbell squatting great for you? Is it going to support your muscle growth goals if you're trying to build your legs? And what else might you be considering when it comes to growing your legs? Sound like a good plan for today? What do you think?
I think that would be good. I'm excited for this conversation.
I'm going to turn it to you to actually talk first about why barbell squats are so beloved. You just alluded to this a little bit as like, it's the key iconography, but why do we start off with barbell squats? Like, why do people turn to them so easily, and why do we put them in programming and all that? What's the validity of barbell squatting?
The cool thing about barbell squatting is it's one of those movements when you first get into the gym, like you think of, okay, I need to hit a leg day. All right. Like, what should I do? Well, barbell squats come to mind. And it's one of those movements where you can progress relatively linearly at when you're first getting started. And there's a lot of positive reinforcement with that. Maybe you can add even like 5 pounds aside every single week. That's extremely motivating, and also is checking off a big box of achieving, progressive overload in our training. I think it also hits a lot of muscle groups at once. So, per set, we're getting like a really great stimulus for our legs theoretically. And it also just rehearses that movement pattern, which translates well into a lot of other leg movements. So it can be very helpful, especially at the beginning of your fitness journey, to like learn how to speak barbell, and more specifically for leg training, learn how to speak barbell.
So it's a really good entry point, I think, in terms of giving people something that they know what to do in terms of, okay, I know if I'm going to hit legs, I'm going to go do a squat. So it kind of takes away the confusion of where do I start? And it gives you great progression because it's a load that, small increments are achievable to add on a weekly or, semi-regular basis. And also, you're working your legs. Like, there's no doubt about that. If anybody's ever done a squat, like, you're like, all right, I'm working here, right? So that's all like really, really key. But if I were to ask you, all those things considered, should everybody be barbell squatting if they're trying to grow their legs? What's your answer?
Definitely not. As you mentioned with powerlifting, there's the have-tos. You have to do the big three. There's no way around it. It's not like we're competing with like how much do you curl or something. That's a whole different thing, right? But when it comes to building muscle and physique development, there's no have-to exercises. And I think one of the key things that we wanted to highlight in this is different people based on their limb lengths and based on like their biomechanics. So how your body is, we'll say, structured. Barbell squats might or might not be a great option. So the two kind of ends of the spectrum, we've had like a couple clients, shout out Brandon and shout out Gilbert. Both, when you watch them squat, everything looks fantastic. Like, it's so smooth, so buttery. The reps look perfect. The body segments just look like they're made to move like that. But then you have other people like, shout out Courtney here, or even myself, you could argue, where the barbell squat just doesn't jive well. Like, things just don't click and it just doesn't look as smooth. So I think the first key thing to think about is, how your body is put together.
So there are reasons to squat and reasons not to squat, right? And I think they're going to be different by each person. And we're going to dive into those in a lot more detail and shout out some of those considerations to help you evaluate if barbell squats are right for your leg growth goals. Before we can do that, let's actually just talk a little bit about the idea of how you grow muscle in your legs, or how you grow muscle, period, because it's kind of the same principles as everywhere else, right? Because I think that's essential to understand before we can dive into how you actually evaluate if squatting is going to grow your legs. So what would you say are the key criteria that somebody needs to keep in mind if they're trying to grow their legs?
If we want to just paint a very, very simple rudimentary picture on what is going to be the key drivers of muscle growth or hypertrophy, would be, if we can check some boxes, it would be, okay, are we putting tension on the muscle group we're trying to grow? All right. So does the exercise you're doing hit that muscle group, and is there tension applied on that muscle? Number two would be, are we having sufficient volume across the week? So are we doing enough number of sets to provide a sufficient stimulus for growth? And then are we training close enough to failure during those sets? Are we training like at least with 3 or less reps in the tank, we can say on a per set basis? So our proximity to failure, or what's called our relative intensity, how hard we're training. And then if we're able to then progress at our lifts over time. If we're checking those boxes, you're giving a lot of what you need to stimulate growth in hypertrophy.
Let's walk through those 4 criteria and outline what each of them looks like for somebody with a barbell squat to be like, yep, checking those boxes, I'm good, I'm going to keep barbell.
Yeah, so I guess one of the first things is when you squat, you actually feel, so let's say we're trying to grow our quads, right? Because most people squat to grow their quads, for example. If you do a squat and you're feeling like only lower back and glutes, you're not feeling subjectively, you're not feeling a good stimulus on the quad. So you're not checking that box, right? Yes, which would be the tension box. Now, if you squat and you're like, holy crap, my quads are super pumped and like I feel like jello, well, you're probably hitting your quads pretty well. The second point that we talked about was enough volume over the course of the week, which, it has some nuances, but in this case, it's like, okay, if we're hitting a few sets of squats, we have other movement patterns, but, that it does check that volume box, so that's a little bit different. Training hard enough, also that would be, up to your intention of like how much you give into the barbell squat set. I will say for a big movement like barbell squat, because it involves stability and it's a free weight option, your ability to train to failure might be a little bit more risky, right? Like if you think about like a leg press, for example, I know we're going to dive into other things later, but like you can take a leg press all the way to failure. Worst case scenario, you just get bottomed out, you just step out of the machine. For a barbell squat, taking it close to failure, not only are there other considerations, but also from a safety perspective, worst case scenario could be you get injured, which is not great. So in talk about training intensity, there are some considerations there. And then the last, the progression scheme, just over time, are we able to progress at it? It is a movement that, especially if you're a beginner, you can progress pretty well and consistently and predictably at.
That's very practical. Like if you're listening to this and you're going, okay, is barbell squatting for me? There's your practical guidelines of how to evaluate if a barbell squat is able to support your muscle growth goals when it comes to training legs. One other thing I want to add is just the one thing that is absolutely non-negotiable for growing muscle, and it kind of relates to both volume and progression, is consistency. If you're not able to train a barbell squat consistently, then that can be an inhibitor to achieving your growth goals. So for example, like this might seem kind of basic, but I'm going to say it anyways. If barbell squatting, like for some people, like myself, it is daunting to go into the gym and be like, I got a barbell squat today. And if you are sitting there going like, any day where I have barbell squats, I find some reason not to go to the gym because it's too intimidating, then barbell squatting probably isn't an ideal exercise for you. Because I'm going to just say it, if you don't go, you can't grow, right? So if you're not going to the gym consistently enough, and you're not training consistently enough within those principles that you outlined, the growth isn't going to happen.
100%. If you don't go, you don't grow. And I like that. But I think also this just goes back to you mix your preference too. Like even if you do check those boxes with barbell squats, if you're not enjoying them, like you don't have to do them. And I think a lot of times we will give so much more attention into training and progress way better if we do enjoy things. And that's where a lot of people don't think about it. They think about theory and they don't think about
preference is so big. So I would say like preference is almost like the outer box that encompasses all of the actual training criteria that you outlined. Because if you think about the role of preference, and I think with preference comes enjoyability, it comes consistency, all that. you do the thing you want to do. You typically don't do the thing you don't want to do. So if you don't enjoy barbell squats, you might perform them in a rush state, which doesn't allow you to apply as much tension. You might not push your progressive overload because you're like, oh, I don't know, I'm just going to do what I did last week and get this over with. You might not train to failure because you don't have that, like that mental intensity that it takes. If you're really feeling the vibe of something, it goes a long way to actually like pushing training intensity closer to failure. And volume, I think, like, let's say you're just like, I'm not going to program them because I don't like them, right? Okay, you're not going to maybe hit enough leg volume overall. So I do think preference and consistency that is unlocked from preference are absolutely non-negotiable as a consideration. So squats can do a good job of like checking those key boxes. We've just talked about it. Sometimes they don't, right? So I'd love to walk through a little bit of when barbell squats might not actually be the right exercise for your programming if your goal is to grow your legs. We're going to talk first about these criteria, and then we'll go into the nuances between growing your legs if you're talking quads or glutes. But let's just talk overall some of those key considerations around whether or not barbell squats might be the best fit for you.
Yeah, so I kind of alluded to this earlier with based on your biomechanics and how your body is built and the structure of your body, we'll say, barbell squats might or might not be a great choice. And maybe, Courtney, I mentioned like, a couple of clients where, wow, everything looks smooth and buttery with the squats. And then for you, maybe not the case. So I don't know if you want to give a little bit of context to what I was saying earlier.
Sure, yeah. I mean, kudos to Gilbert and Brandon, who you shouted out before, of like just people who can make squats look really natural. Speaking from experience, I do not make squats look natural, and they really don't feel natural for me. Like, I kind of have long legs and a short torso. So because of that, the angles of my squats, I end up bending forward a lot. I end up leaning forward, which really takes a lot of the stimulus off my quads and puts a lot of strain on my lower back. So for me, I did barbell squat for a while when I was getting started in the gym, and it was great. All of those things that you talked about earlier, being able to progress, being able to feel comfortable, having a barbell on your back, getting used to, hey, this is heavy. That feels good. Okay. Those have a lot of merit. But as I became more advanced in my training and became more, I think, aware of the subjective stimulus I was getting from different exercises, kind of coming to terms with the fact that I'm just not built to squat. And that's not an excuse. Like, I gave it a very fair shot. I tried. You reviewed my form. Other people reviewed my form. And it's just one of those things where having super long legs and a short torso, it didn't naturally compel me to squat as smooth or buttery or naturally in a way that gave me effective stimulus with my training. And I hit a plateau, right? It came to this point where I couldn't add more load to the bar, either for fear of like increasing the strain on my back and injury risk, or just because like my body wasn't developing that movement pattern as well.
And that's a good point, especially for you. I know you're trying to bring up the quads, and for somebody that has your kind of limb segment lengths, we'll say, you will have to have more of a forward lean versus somebody who has a different arrangement of their limb lengths without overcomplicating things here. They can stay a bit more upright, and therefore it becomes more of a quad bias squat. And not to say that one is better than the other, but for the sake of hitting your quads, what you're trying to do, if you have to squat with a little bit more of a leaned over posture, we'll call it, it's not going to be as great for you for the purpose why you're squatting. I think that's definitely an important thing to highlight. Do you think we kind of wrapped up that point there?
Yeah, I think so. Just key takeaway is biomechanics is like, know your own body, know how you're built. And it also doesn't mean that because you're built like this, no, you can't squat, or because you're built like that, yes, you can squat. It's just saying, come to terms with the reality of how your natural body structure could impact your squat form.
Okay. The second thing I think I want to bring up is level of advancement with training and strength is a big thing to think about, because if I look at some of our more advanced clients, they're very strong at a barbell squat, right? So what happens when you're very strong at a lift like that is the warm up and setup time takes a very, very significant portion of your total workout window. And therefore, if we're doing barbell squat warming up, hitting 3 sets with like 4 minutes rest in between, by the time we just finish the first exercise, they're already like a quarter or half of the way through our total workout time. By the time you finish your barbell squats, like there's not a lot of room for time to fit in your other volume, but also it's eaten up a lot of the fatigue cost because it's such a big demanding movement. And when you are so strong at a lift like that, it takes a lot out of you. Every rep is very demanding psychologically, and also your nervous system can be pretty zapped. So that's something to think about, especially like later in a diet. For very strong people, I'll rarely program that because there's so much of your energy will go into that, and it just sacrifices a lot of the other quality work you can do for the rest of your workout. And as you were saying earlier with the enjoyment principle, like there's psychological fatigue and training fatigue, right? And they both we can blanket them on the same umbrella. Even just me waking up in the morning knowing I would have to do heavy squats is a psychologically taxing, which is another layer of fatigue, anticipatory fatigue, we call it.
Yeah, and it just becomes a little bit inefficient at that point, I guess, if you're directing so much energy into maybe these 3 sets that you're trying to hit, and it's taking away from, I don't know, let's say you got another 15 sets in your workout that you have to hit, and it's taking away the ability to structure those. If you go back to that volume principle that you talked about as essential for muscle growth and the training intensity principle, if you can't hit the same volume for the rest of your workout, or you're sacrificing intensity because you are so zapped, both psychologically and physically, then you actually are compromising your overall training principles. So seeing where barbell squats might fit within your total leg day or your total leg volume over the course of a week, you might start to see it's like, oh, that's not actually as efficient when it comes to adhering to the principles that I know are going to actually drive muscle growth.
And that's very well said. And the thing is, there's no way we're going to, like, the goal shouldn't be to limit fatigue completely from training, or else you can't train hard without a fatigue cost. It's just the cost of doing business with building muscles. However, there is something, we didn't make this up, but there's a term coined like stimulus to fatigue ratio per given set, right? So like how much of a stimulus for hypertrophy or muscle growth do we have per set that we hit compared to how much of a fatigue cost there is? You could, in theory, it's optimal to have exercise that give us tons of stimulus but low fatigue for obvious reasons when we're talking about physique development. So in terms of a barbell squat, we might have high stimulus, but we also have potentially, depending on how you're built and how you squat, right? For the muscle group we're trying to look at, but also there's a very high fatigue cost. So sometimes the juice just isn't worth the squeeze depending on your content.
Right. And if you are somebody, we talked about the preference factor before. If you are somebody who loves squatting, okay, you probably don't have the same like psychological fatigue that Parris was alluding to of like waking up in the morning and being like, oh my God, I have to squat today. And you also might not have the same sense of physical fatigue because you're just energized by doing the thing you love. So that is something to consider, but a lot of people don't have that, right? So absolutely consider the fatigue exchange and the stimulus to fatigue ratio that you are getting from barbell squats. As a third point on potential reasons to consider not barbell squatting, I do want to talk about one that is like super obvious, but I'm going to throw it out there. Equipment access. Not everybody actually has access to a barbell or a squat rack. Some people have home gyms that don't have that. Some people have condo gyms that don't have a squat rack or might have a Smith machine instead. Or some people just kind of like train at home with dumbbells. But very easy to say, like if you don't have a barbell or a squat rack, don't barbell squat. I think why I want to bring that up is because it's not to say that you can't grow your legs because you don't have that. There are examples of, and we'll get into this later on, we'll talk about how you can grow your legs, but I just want to put it out there as like, it's a very obvious example. If you don't have the equipment, you don't have to do it. You don't have to like all of a sudden change gyms or drive an hour away to go to a gym that has a squat rack just because like you think you need to squat.
Sure, for sure. And I think COVID was a really good reminder that as long as we follow the training principles and the primary drivers of hypertrophy, that we don't have any have to exercises. I think that was a perfect reminder. Like we were training at home with single leg split squats. We were doing sissy squats and like, some other wacky stuff that we luckily don't have to do now because we have gym access. But, we were doing that stuff. And guess what? It still worked because it checked the major boxes for driving hypertrophy. So it's just another kind of reminder of sometimes we pigeonhole ourselves into it has to be like this in order for us to make progress. When it's like, hold on a second.
Yeah, does it have to be like that, or are you just used to doing it like that, or is it just what you think you have to do? So that's a separate philosophical argument. But I think in this case, do you have to barbell squat, or are you just used to barbell squatting? Know people who tell you to barbell squat, or just never considered an alternative? Right. Fourth, last reason to consider why I think we're liking fours. I don't know. There were 4 great reasons or rationales behind hypertrophy. We're now into 4 reasons not to squat. I don't know. 4 is the number of the day. So the fourth one is injury, right? Or let's not call it injury. Let's call it more physical limitations or specific physical challenges. If you're somebody who has different ailments or different considerations when it comes to physical health and well-being, barbell squats, you were saying, are incredibly taxing, can be loaded very heavily. compound movement. Can you talk a little bit about, like, based on your experience working with so many different clients, where the role of physical limitations kicks in when it comes to evaluating if you should squat or not?
Yeah, I think with certain clients, they might have, well, a lot of people have back issues or knee issues. And even if form is good, sometimes it doesn't matter. It's still an issue. Like, for example, on the extreme end of the spectrum, shout out Richard, who has fractures in like his lower spine, right? And therefore, we cannot do any compression of the spine. And guess what is in barbell squats? Tons of compression of the spine. So any axial loading like that is a no-go. So that immediately removes barbell squats as an option. And there's a lot of other, people that have similar kind of issues. Or if no matter how you try to squat, you still have knee pain. It's like, okay, let's not try to keep trying it if we know that it's causing some sort of pain. Because guess what? If you have pain, you're not going to be able to progress consistently over time. And you're always going to be holding back. Even subconsciously, there's always going to be that little bit that's not going to allow you to just give it into your set.
Yep, agreed. And I'm just going to say it in this platform is we're not pain specialists. We're not physiotherapists. If you do have any sort of pain or agitation, please go see like a professional that is, deals specifically with those challenges. But for the purpose of understanding your programming for muscle growth, if you are facing those challenges, it is worthwhile potentially considering alternative exercises where you don't have the fear of increasing your risk. Alrighty, so we covered off reasons not to barbell squat. If you are sitting there going, all right, I've decided whether or not I want squats in my program, and if you want to keep barbell squats, awesome, great job. Keep at it. Can't wait to see what happens. If you are somebody who just went through all our criteria with us and you're like, you know what, I actually am starting to think barbell squats are not for me, but I still want to grow my legs. Let's talk about that. We gave you some tips up front around the things to consider for muscle growth. Now we want to actually talk about some great alternative movements that you can include to keep growing your leg and why they adhere to those principles. You want to go for it? You want to kick things off?
There are a lot of squat variations that are not barbell squats. Okay, let's just put that out there. And if you're a beginner, goblet squats are even great before you do back squat, but as you get stronger, you're not going to be able to do that. But there's a lot of machines, like leg press is still a squat variation, and there's a bunch of different variations you can do within leg press. Hack squats, pendulum squats, Smith machine squats, which might just be a little bit better with stability and organization of the setup. Single leg variations like split squats, lunges. There's so many other options where we can still check those major boxes of driving hypertrophy and get a crazy awesome stimulus on the muscle groups we're trying to hit in our legs that are not barbell squats.
100%. Say it louder for the people in the back. One of my new favorite phrases. If we think about squats, the movement pattern, not the barbell squat, but just the entire movement pattern, two key things involved. One is knee flexion. So you're bending at the knee. Your knee is kind of tracking over towards your toes, right? And the other one is almost this visualization of like bringing your butt to your heels in a way, right? Meaning your butt's coming down to your heels. All the exercises that you just listed kind of have that in common. So in terms of the actual mechanical nature of a squat pattern, look at how many different ways there are to actually achieve that. Like you said, leg press. Think about it. As you're pushing up, you're bringing your heels and your butt are kind of increasing or decreasing in distance. All of your single leg movement patterns, 100%. All of your squats that you're just doing with machines instead of a barbell, or your goblet squat, knee flexion, heels and butt changing in distance, right? So if you're trying to look for alternatives, that can be a way that you start to think, is this a squat pattern? Is this going to kind of train the same parts of the body as my barbell squat would have?
Definitely. And there's lots of options to do that. And I think Courtney and I both subjectively love, again, I love gyms don't have these, but pendulum and hack squats have been the favorite, just hitting those hard right now. I think we're both trying to grow our quads at the moment. So I think we've both been hammering at least one of those for the past little bit.
Yeah. I have quad volume 3 times a week. So let's just say I need to really prioritize recovery because I'm training, I'm not just hitting the volume. I will give myself some credit. I'm training them pretty damn hard.
Absolutely.
So
I love it.
It's a lot, but it's rewarding. Yeah. Because you brought up the hack squats and the pendulum squats, I want to just talk a little bit about kind of like my journey away from the barbell. Just in case anyone else wants to, gets inspired or for what it's worth. After kind of coming to terms with, I don't love barbell squats. I'm not getting a good quad activation because trying to grow the quads. I did do a lot of Smith machine squatting. And that was a really great option as well, because if you think about it, it's actually probably the most similar to a barbell squat in terms of like you're literally putting a bar on your back. But the difference is the stability is really great. So if you want to play around with, hey, can I load this more? Or you can change your foot position. So for me, finding myself bending forward too much gave me options to kind of play around with my setup in ways that you can't do with a barbell squat by nature of you're going to drop it or you're going to hurt yourself. So the Smith machine was a really, really great way for me to start to do that. But I still, because of the kind of same challenge of my legs being longer than my torso, with the Smith machine, I was still finding the same issues I was having with barbell squat. But now using hack squats and pendulum squats, like when my gym got those pieces of equipment, I was like, oh my God, it's been a game changer because now the angles are changing. So no longer am I kind of on a flat ground trying to achieve the same squat, leaning forward too much. Yeah. Now I'm able to play around with different angles. And again, I can change my foot position on the platform. I can change the level of depth that I hit. And so configuring all those variables is allowing me to squat in ways that I never would have before. And guess what? I'm training really hard. I'm using intensity principles. I'm able to also progress over time. And I think just being open to exploring is the key takeaway. So that's what I'm taking out of my journey so far when it comes to squatting is being open to exploring and figuring out different ways to achieve a squat.
And people want to know, like, what is the best exercise for X, Y, Z, right? But I think this is going to lead into the next part of our conversation, which is there needs to be some trial and error, right? And there needs to be some subjective ratings going on in your mind of, okay, how much of a stimulus did I feel in the target muscle, right? How much did I enjoy this? How fatiguing is this? Like, all kind of thinking about rating those in your mind, and that will give you a good idea of how this is going to fall within or out of your training program.
What about you? I'm going to put you on the spot. Like when it comes to like your relationship with barbell squats or squats in general right now, you did talk about you're also trying to grow the quads. What does that look like for you?
I haven't barbell squatted in a very long time. I would say like 2 years almost. Now they were productive exercise for me for a time being, even though I hated them. I ran them for several years hard and got decently strong. And like they look not bad. And you know what? It was kind of fun. Like when I was deep into building phases and carrying a bit more body fat, and eating a lot, I would find them much more enjoyable than when I was in fat loss phase. Definitely tough at the end of fat loss phase, putting that heavy bar on your back. But I will say, so I have a pretty decent relationship with them, but I would say I get so much more out of my training with more machine work. Recently, I'm doing pendulum squat on one day, hack squat on another day, and then different leg extension variations, some sissy squats. We're hitting them in a lot of different ways right now. Yeah, not to say I don't enjoy barbell squats like as much as maybe you don't enjoy them, but I think I've had a lot more productive leg training actually without them for a lot of the reasons that we already talked.
Yeah, and the variety is kind of nice too, both mentally, like just knowing that, you know, if you want to hit a certain amount of leg volume, you don't have to go in the gym like twice a week and squat. Like you can do or barbell squat, you can do different versions or just over time mixing things up. And when you sometimes add variety, I think sometimes we chase variety too much, but adding variety can also really facilitate some quick progression. And that's pretty cool too. Okay, amazing. I think we covered quads. All of the squat-based variations, you can target the quads, but some people might be going like, okay, but I'm squatting for my glutes. So if I take barbell squats out, is that going to affect my ability to grow my glutes? What do you think?
So I think if I was like, okay, we want to prioritize glutes, like let's choose an exercise that we think is going to hammer the glutes. The first one that comes to mind would not be barbell squats. And I know there are some studies going over like, can you grow the same from like hip thrust as you can from barbell squats for glutes? And maybe they showed like a different perspective, but I don't really still believe that. And I do think it depends on how you squat. Like if you're a bit more of a forward lean, yeah, okay, we're hinging a bit more at the hips. I get it. Maybe you're going to hit more glutes. But especially if you're an upright squatter and you're doing like a high bar squat, like, are we really hitting at glutes as hard as training things like we're going to get to like hip hinge patterns, like heavy RDLs or like hip thrusts or like any sort of adduction movement or kickbacks? Like those are going to hit the glutes, I think, a lot more directly, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So glutes are almost like that secondary muscle group when you're squatting. So if you actually want to target the glutes and you want to prioritize growing your glutes, even if you love barbell squatting and all of those principles in favor of barbell squatting adhere to you, functionally and theoretically, you're probably actually better off prioritizing hinge-based movements for your glutes before you even think about squats.
Especially if you're squatting high bar and everything. It's kind of like this is not like a direct good comparison, but it's like if I want to grow my biceps, would I do heavy rows It would probably hit my biceps, but like, can I just do a bicep curl? Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And save yourself the fatigue costs, right? I mean, some hinge movements are very fatiguing too, but if you don't need to put that spinal compression or any of that you spoke to earlier, just don't need it. Before we wrap things up for today, there is one really, really important takeaway when evaluating exercise selection. Can you beat me to it? Do you want to say it? You want to share it?
There is no best exercise for something, but there are better and worse exercises for you specifically, given a multitude of variables.
So if you are trying to figure out what exercise is best, instead of chasing some sort of mythical, this is the best exercise, even if that's what social media and YouTube headlines will tell you, think about what is best for you. So best for you, 95% of the time will beat some sort of claimed best. Now, that's not to say, like you said, some exercises are still better. So how do we start to evaluate? What can we do to know if something is a better choice than another exercise?
I think it's always going to balance kind of theory and preference, right? Like we can think about, okay, on paper, these are the exercises that should be great exercises. And then when you go into the gym and then you confirm that, it's like, okay, for me, this is also a great exercise. I think that's the main thing, and why, you need to kind of know roughly. It's not like I'm going to say doing isometric squat holds on the wall is going to be like the best quad builder, because on paper it's just not, and theoretically it's not. No matter how I feel my quads burning on the wall, right? It's just not. But I think it's always a mixture of combining theory with then in the gym really what's going on.
And hopefully we left some theory today too for people to start considering. Hopefully that's half of the work done for you. So if you're thinking about squat patterns for quads, that knee flexion element, or if you're thinking about growing your glutes, considering the hip hinge, those are objective truths, right? But the other half of the equation, you kind of need to do a little bit of work on your own, figure out how things feel, figure out what your psychological relationship to different exercises is, think about the volume you can handle, think about enjoyment, think about stimulus, all of those things. So it's a two-part equation, but one that if you can crack it, you will be smooth sailing with any of your muscle growth goals. Anything else before we wrap things up that you want to shout out in this to answer the question?
I don't think so. I think pretty comprehensive.
Amazing. So do you need to barbell squat to grow your legs? No, you don't need to. There is no need to or have to exercise. But hopefully you now have some considerations to help you evaluate whether or not barbell squats are good for you. If you love barbell squatting, please drop a comment below. Let us know and tell us why you love them. If you don't, and if you are like me and you're like, I found these better alternatives, we'd love to know what is working for you when it comes to squat alternatives, squat movements, squat patterns. Please drop a comment below. And if you haven't already, while you're there in the comments, feel free to subscribe. The subscribe button is right next to the comment button. And without further ado, we will leave you for this week, and we'll be back next Monday with another episode of Truth Talks. Bye for now.